This podcast is intended for educational purposes only and is not medical or legal advice. Always follow your local policies, procedures, and protocols when functioning in your respective profession. Additionally, the views expressed by the speakers and owners of this podcast are their own and do not represent the views of their respective employers. Listener discretion is advised.
Alert Medic 1 response.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Alert Medic 1 podcast. Today, you've got myself, Josh, and Cody, and we're going to be talking about progression in EMS, and that can be a pretty broad topic. But what we want to talk about today, specifically more on it, is that there's this feeling sometimes of either jump on the bus, the train, whatever euphemism you want to say, use for progression, or are you too slow to get on? And that kind of applies to things like, seeing all these studies come out and, a study says, oh, we should be doing this. Should we jump on that real quick, or should we wait and see what happens? And then when we wait, do we wait? Now, are we too far behind the 8-ball on it? Is it maybe not as good as we thought, or we're kind of catching up and we're not seen as a progressive agency or department, state, whatever it is. And then some topics that kind of fall underneath that we'll get into as we talk about it. But Cody, what are your initial thoughts on just progression EMS in that realm?
I don't know. It splinters my butt. I sit on the fence of it, right? As long as you adopt this new evidence-based thing, it doesn't matter, if you look like an early adopter. But by the same token, you can jump onto it you can jump on it really, really early and then kind of get a little egg on your face later on when you find out it wasn't a big deal. So, I've had a medical director and a couple of clinical managers say this to me, and even there's a book I'm reading by Roger Nebo, and it says, in medicine, you never want to be the first one to do something, but you also don't want to be the last one either. So I think there's a happy middle ground in there somewhere.
Yeah. And right now, there is some topics in EMS that are like very focused on this thing happening. Do we jump on it now, or do we wait? Do we look and see what happens? The things that come to mind, the two that I'm just going to throw out there, calcium. Calcium has been like everyone's favorite drug and word to talk about in evidence-based medicine and research and studies and conferences. Everyone's just calcium. More specifically, calcium in the trauma patient and the patient that's receiving blood. And then the other one is esmolol, I think. Esmolol is one of those ones out there that you're starting to see protocols include Maryland. And there's not a whole lot out there that says, hey, this is actually what we should be doing. But there is some evidence at the same time that says it. And there's a lot of agencies that are kind of jumping on board that train on esmolol, which is fair to say yet to be proven in like a really true big study or a really hard look. It's been looked at by individual agencies, but still there's no like widespread decision on this. And then calcium, we've been going back and forth over the tennis court on this for at least the past 5 years. Luckily, for those, if you're not paying attention, you should be. The calcium study that came out that was presented by Dr. Stephen Shower, Army EM Doc, on Instagram. And it really it showed us what some of us were saying all along. It proved us right and wrong on a lot of things, and I think it's going to be a big change for a lot of agencies going forward. Not just agencies, the military too. So for those that don't know, at least in Maryland, right now it's after the second unit of whole blood or second or third unit of whole blood, we're supposed to be getting calcium, and now we're seeing, is that actually what we should be doing? Because there's all kinds of variations in hyper and hypocalcemia in the in the trauma patient and in the patient receiving blood. So I I think those are, I don't know, Cody, if there's other ones that you would like to highlight there.
Yeah, I've got
I'd say those are the
hot one.
Okay.
Chest compressions and trauma.
Yeah, there's a great one. Yeah.
It's one of those things where when you read it or you hear somebody present it, you go, for Christ's sake, that makes a ton of sense to delay, not withhold, but at least right now, my mindset is delay until these other things are taken care of. And so I did a protocol draft for an organization I was with, and they were like, you know what? Love it. Great idea. But we cannot say this right now. They can't say it. It's not ready for minds. The minds aren't ready to hear that. And like, if there was a huge concern that if it was an air medical agency, if our customers had heard that we were doing that there was a chance that we could hurt our customer base by doing something so seemingly out of left field. But that's another one of those things where you're like, hey, this makes so much sense, and I don't know why we're doing it. But the medical community at large, or your local community at large, is going, I want to be first. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but I don't want to be first.
Yeah, in that vein, on the chest compressions, I remember during COVID, there were agencies that were adopting termination of resuscitation protocols. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people attributed it to the COVID epidemic. And then we're like, oh my God, and media got a hold of it, and it got spun in this way that agencies weren't going to do compressions anymore. They weren't going to do CPR, But no, it was termination resuscitation. A lot of us are familiar with that, but the public wasn't. And that's like that thing where you're saying it's how we build it. And while it's evidence-based, is it appropriate at the time? Stuff like that, But no, yeah, chest compressions and trauma. If you guys follow OK Medic, you know how he feels about them. You know how there is a definite change in how we should be doing it. Cody has also written a paper on how we should probably reframe our look at trauma resuscitation and trauma rest and priorities of work within that. I'll let the audience take a look at that yourselves and digest it yourself. But once again, it's one of those things that it's evidence-based. Do we jump on this now, or do we wait until it's more acceptable, that we have some more backing behind why we do it? And back to the catalyst of all this, is it too late when we do adopt it? Have we been doing the quote unquote wrong thing, or the not accepted thing, by doing compressions in this case, when medical community at large is saying maybe we should reconsider how we do these compressions? So jumping on to the train too fast. So stuff that we can encounter with jumping on the train too fast, like you said, is getting egg on the face later. But we need to meter our acceptance of new practices with how well it's going to benefit our patients. Okay, to try and take this into the clinical aspect. There's lots of stuff out there that is great. It's studied in a paper, and they figure out that XYZ is great, but how is that going to affect our patients, our patient population, the demographics that we're working with? Is it going to be the best approach, and is it actually going to benefit our patient at large? Sometimes we have to take these things and apply them very specifically. And yeah, I think it's a balance of an administration wanting to move the needle forward and figuring out what is going to work best for our patients. To be honest, right now I'm drawing a blank on what else to say on that.
Well, I think there's a benefit to being like an early adopter and say, okay, all we have is this small body of evidence of, I don't know, there's 6 papers. The medical director likes it, the organizational leadership likes it, and we want to be early adopters because we want to prove the concept. That's why we want to implement it, right? And I think in those organizations, I think that's a cool place to be. I think that's a truly progressive organization. Hey, we're going to try this. We're going to implement this and contribute to the pre-hospital body of evidence instead of doing it. So I think there's some benefit to doing it that way. I think that, to your point, it has to be tempered with chasing the flavor of the month, right? So if you're not intending to contribute to the larger body of evidence, or if you're just kind of chasing, XYZ progressive agency, or attempting to keep up with competitors, and that's the sole reason you've adopted this thing. I mean, then if it works out, it works out, and you gambled, great. If it doesn't work out and you got egg on your face too, what you don't have is the I don't want to say the word defense, but that's essentially what you have. So organization A, who said, we're gonna prove the concept, versus organization B did it just because organization A did it. Organization B's got quite a bit of egg on their face, in that respect.
Yeah. It shouldn't be a competition between agencies in the end.
Yeah.
It should be a competition to deliver the best care for everyone. So to kind of go from this topic into a subtopic of all this, progression in EMS. So we kind of talked about at large following evidence-based medicine and how that affects what we do. Now let's talk about individual agencies moving their own needle forward, maybe not so much hopping on bandwagons, but adding things to the toolbox of their medics. So medicine has, what is it? They say it takes 20 years for like new practices to become standard practices or best practices. Like it takes 20 years for adoption, kind of system wide or something like that. I know there's a number. We've talked about it before. I don't remember
I couldn't remember
the exacts, but it does take an amount of time. But we're also seeing huge advancements within our field of pre-hospital emergency medicine in the past 5 to 10 years. Definitely night and day from what is accepted as the start of EMS. I know we've talked, first episode, video episode we had was with Mr. John Moon from Freedom House, and they were doing things back then that were cutting edge and then lost and then brought back much later. But what most people think, where we have come from, is a big leap. Medication-wise, interventions, the stuff we're doing on scene, transport to the hospital end of it, night and day from what we've seen in the past. If you guys remember or listen to the Stroke 101 episode, just in the past 10 to 15 years, we've seen amazing advances in stroke care and stroke recognition by EMS and then care in the hospital, resulting in vast differences in turnarounds and lack of deficits, stuff like that. But to get where I'm saying, to get where I'm going with this. So you have an agency that adds new meds, new ways to deliver those meds, whether that's pumps, we add in vents or whole blood, maybe swap out some devices for newer devices or more proven devices, stuff that works better, whatever it is. CPAP devices, SGAs, different VL devices, all that. Is there a point where it is too much for the medics to absorb and then apply into their practice? And Cody and I may differ a little bit on this. And I come from the stance of when it is something that is well within the scope of the average medic, stuff that we're taught in class, or things that are going to enhance your care to make the average care that we're going to deliver easier to deliver. So, for example, pumps. A lot of us are not taught pumps in initial education. It's just not common, because not everyone has them. So why would the standard be pumps? The standard is to teach how to do a manual drip, how to make it, how to observe it, how to manage it, how to titrate, all that. When you add in a pump, it makes that delivery of those meds that much easier, typically, as long as, they don't buy the most convoluted pump off the shelf. something that is easy to use, easy to implement, and so these are enhancements. Is there a point where it's too much and an agency has to slow down implementing practices that are going to benefit patient care and make the providers' lives easier for the sake of, I guess, the provider's mindset? So, Cody and I talked about this a little bit before the episode, so we have a little bit of differing opinions on this. But, Cody, what's your thoughts?
I don't know, Josh. We're not that much different. I think there's a risk of if your organization does change management well, which is not necessarily it's not what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a real mainstream topic in a lot of the fire and EMS world until you get up into that like EMS officer 3 or fire officer 3 or 4 chief officer kind of stuff. But if you do change management well, then you have a plan to roll things out iteratively so that you don't cause that problem. The shotgun blast approach of whatever that motivation is to implement all this stuff right now real quick, you can change so much so fast that you accidentally induce errors. Your folks are like, I can't keep up with everything you're doing right now, and I can grasp this topic and that topic. So you gotta kind of you gotta have some respect for the human animal's brain to adopt things, because if it takes an industry decades to adopt something as standard practice, when it can certainly take the individual human longer than 6 months or whatever to adopt something into their lexicon. Now, that's not to say that I think there's a difference between I don't agree with this change, therefore I'm going to be resistant to it. I think that's a whole other side of the house. That's a whole different argument versus the folks who are, I genuinely want to do great. I genuinely want to do a good job. I'll do whatever the organization tells me to do and whatever the organization says is the right thing. But that there's a lot happening right now. There's a lot of changes. We just rolled out, in organization X, we just rolled out ventilators, and now you want to roll out 3 new medications and all of this in the same quarter, right? And maybe you could do as organizational leadership, we could do a little bit better job of planning the rollout, executing the rollout really, really well. So I think that's, as a subtopic to the subtopic to the subtopic of our talk, the best ideas and the best what's the word? The best initiatives, they're derailed with a shit rollout. Mm-hmm. I dropped the tool. Here's a video on the LMS. Good to go.
Yep.
Let us know if you have questions. Hey, we have all these questions now, and this was just an initiative that the leadership dropped on everybody. I mean, those rollouts are terrible. Go ahead, Josh. I cut you off.
No, you're good. And I fully agree with you. And I think it comes down to, you gave an example that Agency X rolls out vents, and then a couple months later they roll out a bunch of new meds, and it's like, whoa, like this is a lot. I want to kind of temper my point on this. Like, there are things out there like big rollouts. So vent for a ground medic that is not trained. It is not part of initial education. It's not part of most CE for most departments that do not use them. The first time I got introduced to a vent in education was in critical care. And I will tell you that a lot of that information has gone and jumped out of my brain because I don't use them. And if you rolled out a vent in front of me, that would be a mentally taxing thing for me to learn. And I'd need time to learn it and be good with it. So there are things out there that, when you roll them out and it's a big change to your care and the way you deliver care, and the device has a steep learning curve, that's something. When it is mine is more like a similar device or an enhancement. Is an enhancement? Yes, it is. But it is a large, arduous enhancement.
So then, to bring it back to your point, or to something maybe a little more, what's the word? Localizable. Is that a word? Localizable.
I don't think it is. But
it's a word now.
It, so okay.
I said it's a word. But to bring it to something more relatable. There we go.
Okay.
Let's say that, and I totally agree with you, by the way, that a ventilator takes some time to get your head around it. But let's say that the same organization has BVMs, and they're just rolling out PEEP valves. And to your point, there should be zero resistance to implementation on that. The evidence is there. It's established in pre-hospital practice. No excuse, right? No excuse for not being on board with this. You don't need to be. You don't have to be on board with this. This is something that is standard of care. Is that kind of where you're going with it?
Yeah. Yes. When it's an enhancement, when it's something that we should know pretty much from the get-go.
Yeah.
Or it's just a change up of the delivery mechanism. So, going from one type of CPAP to another, and the new one is easier. Stuff like that. And then to kind of talk on your point of rollouts, we might be getting a little off topic here, but this is more speaking to everyone, and maybe more if there's admin of agencies that are listening. Some techniques to rolling stuff out that you have more buy-in from your agency and your people, and maybe you don't have as many issues with people accepting it. So my suggestion is a pilot program, as long as it's a financially feasible and logistically feasible thing to do. Find your high performers within your agency, go to them, say, hey, we want to roll out this pump. We want to roll out this CPAP. We want to roll out this new VL device, whatever it is. And, be like, hey, you're going to have this for 3 months, or assign it to a station. If you're in a fire department, and you guys are going to have it for 3 months. At the end of 3 months, we're going to come to you and be like, what do we need to tell people, and how do you, what are the ins and outs of this? What are the things that you found using it that we need to address when we give it to everyone? And when you have provider or clinician buy-in, those people are then, as long as it's a good product and everything goes well with it, they're probably going to go out there and be your biggest cheerleaders for this product. To be like, hey guys, girls, this is great. This is how I use it. I've used it like this. I had no issues compared to previous device. I found it works best like this, whatever. And then it also gives your people a feeling that they have at least like a pinky on the wheel, like not a whole hand, but at least they have like some buy-in on where the agency is going. And then there's some devices that by doing this, you find out the problems that you would find out anyways, but you're finding out in a small group of people that have buy-in, like they want to do this. Say it's a pump, and they're, all 10 people you give it to, they're like, Ray Raw pumps, I love them, let's do it. I want to do this, I want to use this. And they're the ones coming to you saying, hey, there's an issue with this alarm. Hey, there's an issue with this. There's an issue with this, drip set. There's an issue with this, or this. We need to make sure that we fix these things or find the troubleshoot to it, the workaround. And hey, by the way, maybe we should rethink how we're doing this rollout, this delivery of this medication or something like that. And in turn, when you deliver a polished, not just a finished product, but a polished finished product to the field, to the people at large, they're going to be like, okay, cool. Like they actually cared to figure things out. But when you're constantly finding new problems that could have been possibly discovered during a trial period, and then you're constantly sending out emails, changing things, constantly having to chase problems, you're going to have a much more extended period of buy-in from everyone at large on these devices.
Well, it hurts your next rollout too. So yes. you implement this thing and it's a botched rollout. You already whichever stakeholder that was that rolled it out, you already look like a dummy. You look like a buffoon. You look like you don't know what you're doing because people are like, this doesn't work, 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 and you have no answers to it because you haven't tried it in the field. And you're like, I know, so we'll change this. I know, we'll change that. I know, we'll change this, we'll change that, we'll change this, we'll change that. Well, okay, so you finally get that fire put out. See what I did there? You finally get that fire put out. And now it's time to roll out the next item. And everybody kind of gets this, okay, all right, let's see how this goes. We know this is going to be an ass whipping.
Yeah.
So, hit us with it. So you can, if you botch your rollout too badly, you can hurt the next one, and it's even slower to adopt the next thing, and slower to adopt the next thing.
And then to kind of pull this full circle, I know this, not every agency, department, whatever, can do this, but if you're doing in-house CE, take the new devices, new meds, new procedures, new algorithms, and work them into the next CE rollout. Don't wait a year or two to, get pumps or vents or double sequential defibrillation or esmolol or whole blood or whatever it is that your agency is using that's new, and get it in CE. Then do it within I'd almost say the most immediate CE cycle after that, because it's just going to get more time in hand with people.
Are you saying to do that like in addition to like the
initial
daily
training,
the daily drill?
Yep.
That's probably going to follow it. You're going to drill on this for 2 or 3 weeks, and then there's going to be CE on the back end of it.
Exactly. That's what our professional development has right now. They picked some of the hot topics in new medical stuff. So IV nitro, CPAP, pumps, double sequential, stuff like that, and put it into the scenarios in professional development. And it's just getting more hands-on. And then our quarterly station drills are going to involve skate patients, the new CPAP, IV nitro, just to like hammer it home in a well-tailored scenario, kind of harken back a little bit to airway training mistakes. And yeah, you gotta, if you're gonna do this stuff, there's a proper way to do it, but you also kind of got to go full send. You can't just throw it out there and hope everyone figures it out.
Yeah.
So
I think the example you gave is a really great example of how to do it right. Initial, this is the thing, and these are the buttons, and then you reinforce the use of in protocol and the how-to use through scenario. It's like I don't know if there's very many guitar players that listen to this, but Zach Wild was Ozzy Osbourne's guitar player for a long time. He's filling in for Dimebag Darrell on the Pantera tour. Anyway, when he'll tell you, like, when you're practicing or you're trying to learn something new, make a melody out of it, make something out of it, because that's how the human brain works. You'll solidify it better if you are seeing this applied in real life situations, like trying to learn a new song. You already have. It's way better to learn a song than just to learn scales and nonsense like that. So if we could some way draw a line between those two ideas, that would have been really cool, right, Josh?
Yeah. So
there's a piece to this, though, to talk about change in general. Like organizational change. I mean, there's actual science and process to this. I don't know. Have you ever heard of like Lewin's attitudinal change model? Lewin's.
Might have. I don't know. It sounds at least an iota of familiarity.
Somewhat. But it talks about there's a process to changing things within an organization.
Yeah.
And the first thing, of course, is challenging their mindset, challenging the way that we're doing things right now, and saying, hey, this change needs to happen. That's the challenge. This is the way we're doing it. These are the results. This is the way that I want to do it, and these are the results that other people have generated or that I'm hoping for. So you're already challenging their brains, and then hopefully you can unfreeze their minds. So that's the next step, is to unfreeze their minds. So once you've got their minds unfrozen, so it's okay, this is the thing, these are the results. We're starting to kind of thaw their brains out from this old idea, and it gives you a chance to kind of plant the new one.
Mm-hmm.
Plant the new idea, and then you have to refreeze their minds around the new idea. And I think that's where we botch. And this is where the rollout fits, is when you're trying to refreeze the new idea. If you botch that, man, folks will never buy into the idea. You'll hear about it 10 years later. Oh man, here's this stupid thing that never works that they rolled out 10 years ago. You're like, man, I've been using this for 10 years. I've never had a problem with it.
Yeah, as you say it, I haven't heard the particulars. Maybe I've heard the title of all that. But to give you an example, I think my agency, without knowing, unless they did know about that, they basically did that with our new CPAP devices. So we identified that there was a problem with the old yellow box of death, is what I like to call it. I'm sure everyone knows, but at least some people know what I'm talking about when it comes to CPAP devices. It's a high pressure system, and it's known for just draining the ever living hell out of O2 cylinders. For example, on a D cylinder, you might get 10 minutes. Yeah. So, try moving someone out of a house, an apartment building. And what we found by talking to people and, figuring things out is that a lot of clinicians were hesitant to do CPAP early inside the house because I'm going to run out of a cylinder before I get to the unit. The device and the cords and the hoses with it were not the easiest to manage moving someone down a staircase. It had not a lot going on with it, but at the same time, there was issues that kept people from using it. So okay, so we identified that there's an issue on people doing CPAP early. Kind of harkened back to something we've talked about before, doing interventions on scene. So we want to start that CPAP early. If we know we're going to use it, let's start it early. We've got a device that is logistically straining. There was issues with the devices breaking a lot and not getting great repair on them from the company, a whole bunch of things. So they tasked someone with find the device that you think we should use. And then that guy was the one that said, hey, I don't know if he said it to them or the EMS office said, we want you to teach three stations, all the medics on those shifts, this new device, and they're going to run with it for 3 months. And then if they have any issues, make sure they send it up. And then at the end of 3 months, we're going to look at, talk to people, figure out, was this a good idea? Did this work? Should we move forward? Should we buy it for everyone? Should everyone be using this in the department? And what do you know? We determined that this was a much better product. It was not logistically straining. You can basically use an entire D cylinder for your entire encounter compared to having one that shot through in 10 minutes. So people are now more prone to start it on scene, move them on stair chairs and reeves, stuff like that. Where there was people that were more hesitant to do that before because of the device. And now in turn, the patient is getting proper treatment earlier, feeling better, having clinical improvement. And in the realm of CPAP, I'm not saying 10 minutes is going to do the huge difference of the long-term stay at the hospital, but CPAP is known to reduce hospital stays. So if we're going to start using it earlier, maybe we can turn our patient around just a little bit faster, and then they get home a little bit sooner. And that constant question we get from our patients, when am I going to be home? When am I going to get home? While we don't have an answer, we also know that, hey, it might be a little sooner than it used to be. So, to kind of, bring it full circle, figure out in your agency where your deficiencies are. Get provider buy-in on how to fix it. Don't do it all from the top. I'm sure there's plenty of managers and admin out there that think that they have to be in charge of all the change. They have to be the one that finds the device, that figures out the training, that figures out the rollout plan, and all that stuff. Ask your clinicians in the field to participate. Don't demand it. Ask. Because you'd be amazed at how many of us want to be involved in the process. Because if we're involved, then we get a say. Especially, in trial periods and stuff like that. Like, it's not just like, hey, what do you think about this device? Okay, cool. I'll take your opinion and shovel it here at the bottom of the folder. No, it's you use this for 3 months. We put it in your hands for 3 months. You're kind of, as an agency, as an admin, motivated to have to listen to your people and have them be involved, which is important.
You can't give them ownership like you're talking about. That's a huge deal. Huge deal. When they're telling you it's not working or doesn't work, you owe it to them to listen. You owe it to them to maybe adjust your plan, maybe kill the implementation altogether, kill the initiative altogether.
Mm-hmm.
You owe that to them because they did the work on the back. They did the work on the front end for you.
Yeah. We're kind of only 35 minutes, and I'm blanking on anything else to say. I just marked it. We can cut it out, but anything else you want to bring up?
I think it needs to be the right time and the right tool for your organization. At every level, right? So one of the bigger things when I was a clinical manager, one of the big things that I ran into problems with implementing something new that made sense was the idea always hit me in the middle of the budget year. Always hit me in the like I'd go to a trade show, I'd go to a conference or something and come back with this idea and they're like, we'll put in the budget for next year. You're like, no, I need this now. So you have to forecast your initiatives. You need to forecast those over a couple of years in some cases. Unless you can identify that your organization is actually behind the standard of care, you have time to implement this new thing. Now, if you're behind the standard of care, you certainly need to find somewhere in the budget to probably implement that change sooner rather than later. But again, that's where it comes to being the right time and the right tool for the organization. And sometimes those are, they're opposed to each other. So you need to have the foresight to forecast your organization's or your patient's needs before you're behind that curve of this, kind of what we've been hinting at, right? Before you get behind the standard of care is when you need to make a change. Don't wait until you've crossed that line and then you're playing catch up with the rest of the industry.
Yeah.
I think that's a detriment to your patients, right? We owe that to them to be as current as possible.
It's a detriment to our patients, and it's also actually a detriment to your workforce. There's some places. We'll use Texas as an example. Texas delegated practice state. No, I'm not saying anything bad. Delegated practice state. You can have wildly different protocols and tools to accomplish those protocols from agency to agency within the same county. And
standard of care can change 20 years based on zip code.
Yep. And so if you're not staying current with the times, your employees may be looking to leave and go somewhere else. So it's going to hurt you guys in the end. And so this whole battle of financial, I'm not going to tell you how to, manage your finances for your company. That is definitely not my realm. Or forte of understanding anything about that. But the other way, keeping your clinicians and being current with the times, and also understanding I'm putting out money here to save money here by keeping my people possible. And I'm not saying everyone's motivated by the shiny new thing, but it definitely helps. If your agency is still only doing direct laryngoscopy and not doing video, people are going to be like, why are we not doing video?
It's not a Josh podcast without a plug.
So why is X agency doing it and we're not? And all we hear about is VL. VL. In fact, it happened in my own agency. I would say we were a little bit on the late end of adopting power load stretchers. I started working for them in 2017, and they came in the 2020 lot of ambulances. And sitting at the lineup table with the fire chief one day, someone on my shift said, "Why does where Josh used to work for casual labor, why do they have power loads and we don't? Why are we not looking out for our employees' backs and knees and shoulders, and we're having them use manual stretchers?" And I don't know if it was that talk. I highly doubt it was just that one talk. But they came, and now most of the ambulances in the department have power loads. They have the power stretchers, and they come with their own host of issues and things you have to consider. They are a vast improvement over manual stretchers, the current ones and the old ones. So
also one of those things you can botch the rollout on by only buying the stretcher.
Yep.
Which, if anybody that's ever loaded just the stretcher and a patient without the load system, you're not saving your back.
No, it's not fun.
You are not saving your back at all.
But honestly, I'm kind of out of topics to talk about on this right now. Unless Cody, you got anything else, we're gonna wrap this up.
No, we can. I'm sure we could riff on it for another, 20, 30 minutes. But I think the point's been made. It's solid. There's a way to roll things out to where it's not such a nightmare for the line folks. And it's not such an ass whipping for the leaders. It doesn't turn into a conflict. There's certainly a way to do it. There's some psychological science behind it. And again, like I said before, there's a right time and a right tool for your organization.
Yep.
And your motivation should be to keep up or to push the standard of care, not chase the flavor of the month.
Exactly. I cannot hark on enough that what we implement and what we add to our toolbox should, number one, always be for the patient's benefit. Okay, that's what we're here for. We are not here for the shiny new toy. We're not, even though I brought it up, we're not here to incentivize people to stay or to be like, hey, we got the cool toys. It's all about patient care, because medicine is ever evolving, and that shiny new toy that we all love and use, who knows, in 5 years it'll be like, well, actually, maybe we shouldn't have been using that or doing that protocol or giving that med. It's always changing, and so do what's in the patient's best interest. And for the providers out there, remember, try and be involved and understand how to implement these new things to the patient's best interest. It may be a lot to bring into your mind, but our job is to show up, help the sick and injured, wherever they may be, or whatever complaint they may be, and use the tools we have in our toolbox to their best advantage. It's all about patient outcome. It's all about advocating for the patient and making sure they get the best care possible. So,
you gave me a thought, man.
Okay.
But if you're in a leadership position and you are hearing this and you're thinking that, man, my people don't care if I have this or have that, and I'm not competing with this other organization, I would challenge you to check that mindset, because the individual providers do care. They do care what tools you're using. If in some instances, I've gone between organizations, and I've gone between from an organization that had a lot going for itself clinically to an organization that is, I'm like, wow, we are 10 years behind on this. And I tell you something, your folks can experience that culture shock. Your folks may feel that they can't. This is how you know. When your folks feel that they cannot do their job to their greatest ability because they're hamstrung by what the organization makes available to them to do the job, man, it speaks to your organization's culture. And then, you go culture of excellence, and the tools that you're using to do the job matter. They are a piece of that puzzle. So just good enough in some cases, maybe good enough to satisfy an inspection sheet, for an example. It may be good enough to satisfy, a state mandate. It certainly may not be enough to satisfy what your folks on the line know they need to do the job to the best of their ability. I swear I'm done.
That was a great one to end on. So everyone, thanks for listening. This was a short one. And once again, if you're not following us, follow us on Instagram, AlertMedic1. Follow Cody on Ordinary Ops Medic. And wherever you are, good morning, good evening, good night, and be safe. See you.